The storm came suddenly, rolling down from the northern hills like an angry spirit. The sky was a deep bruise of gray and violet, splitting open with lightning that lit the land for a heartbeat, and then swallowed it back into darkness. Caleb Dorn pulled his coat tighter as his horse fought against the wind. The trail to his ranch was barely visible, just a ribbon of mud and water. He'd been driving cattle for 2 weeks straight and wanted nothing more than a dry bed and a fire. But then through the sheets of rain, he saw something that stopped him cold, a broken wagon tilted into a ditch, its wheels half buried in the mud. At first he thought it was empty. Then the lightning flashed again and he saw her, a woman. She lay crumpled beside the wagon, her dress torn and soaked through, hair plastered to her face like strands of ink. For a second, Caleb thought she might be dead. He swung down from his saddle, boots sinking into the muck, and knelt beside her. Her lips were pale, her skin cold as river stone. But when he touched her shoulder gently, she flinched and whispered something he could barely hear. "Please, don't." Her voice was broken, small, not from the cold, from fear. Caleb froze, hands lifted, making sure she could see them. "I won't hurt you," he said quietly, his voice steady as a calm wind. "You're safe, ma'am. I'm just trying to get you out of this storm." She didn't move, didn't trust him, not yet. But when thunder cracked so loud it shook the wagon, she covered her head with both hands like a child hiding from a blow. That was enough. Caleb took off his coat and wrapped it around her trembling shoulders. She stiffened but didn't pull away. "Let's get you to the horse," he murmured. "You'll freeze to death out here." She shook her head weakly. "Leave me." He almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the woman didn't realize how stubborn a man like him could be. "Ain't in my nature," he said. "Now hold on." He lifted her gently but firmly and felt how light she was. Bones and cold skin, like a bird that had forgotten how to fly. She tried to protest, her words lost in the wind, but he mounted with her cradled in one arm. The horse reared against the rain before settling into a gallop toward the ranch, hooves pounding through mud and thunder. The storm chased them all the way home. By the time Caleb pushed open the ranch door, the fire had gone out, and the air smelled of dust and rain. His housekeeper, Martha, looked up from the hearth and gasped. "Good Lord, Caleb, what in heaven's name—" "Found her by the old ridge," he said, lowering the woman to a chair. "Wagon busted to pieces." Martha hurried over, wrapping the girl in a blanket and kneeling to check her pulse. "She's half dead from the cold," she muttered. "Get more wood for the fire." Caleb did. Soon the flames were roaring again, filling the room with a glow that turned the woman's wet skin to gold. She looked young, maybe 20 at most, but her eyes, when they finally opened, were the eyes of someone who had seen too much. Martha offered her water. She took it with shaking hands but didn't speak. Caleb crouched across from her, elbows on his knees, waiting. "Name's Caleb Dorn," he said softly. "This here's my place. You're safe now." She stared at him, her eyes darting toward the door like a trapped animal. "Safe?" she whispered, voice trembling. "No place is safe." Something inside him tightened. He didn't know who she was or what she'd run from, but he recognized that kind of fear. It was the kind that lived deep and didn't fade easy. He nodded once. "Then you can rest here anyway." Her lips parted as if to argue, but exhaustion won. Her head dropped forward and she fell asleep sitting up, wrapped in his coat. Caleb watched her for a long time. The fire crackled. The storm, outside, began to die, and somewhere in the distance a wolf howled against the thunder's last rumble. He stood, adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, and whispered to the silence, more a promise than words. "You're safe now. No one's gonna touch you here." Outside, the wind eased, and for the first time that night, the land was still. The morning after the storm broke clear and cold, sunlight spilling across the valley like gold poured from a bucket. The rain had washed everything clean, the air, the sky, even the worn fences of the Dorn ranch. But inside the house, the air was heavy with questions. Caleb sat by the kitchen table sharpening his knife slowly, the rhythmic scrape of steel against stone steady as a heartbeat. Across the room, Martha was stirring a pot of oatmeal, muttering under her breath about half-drowned girls and foolish men who bring home strangers. Could have left her for the coyotes, she said finally, glancing over her shoulder. Caleb didn't look up. She wouldn't have made it an hour. Martha sighed, her tone softening. I know, Caleb, I know. But you don't even know her name. What if she's trouble? He paused, staring out the window where the girl, the stranger, sat near the porch, her back to them. She'd borrowed one of Martha's dresses, pale blue with faded flowers, and though it hung loose on her frame, she looked less like a ghost than she had the night before. I reckon trouble already found her, Caleb said quietly. When he stepped outside, the boards creaked under his boots. The girl didn't turn. Her wet hair was now braided loosely down her back, and the sunlight touched the tips like dark copper. You should eat, he said. Martha made breakfast. She didn't answer. He tried again, softer this time. You're safe here, miss. I give you my word. That made her turn. Her eyes were blue-gray like the edge of a storm cloud. Beautiful, but wary. I've heard that before, she said bitterly. It never meant anything. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Maybe it means something different this time. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the wind whispering through the corral. Finally, she stood holding the shawl tighter around her shoulders. Where am I? She asked. Dorn Ranch, a few miles west of Red Hollow. Red Hollow. Her voice trembled on the name. That's close to Clearwater? About 2 days' ride, he said. You from there? She hesitated. He saw the lie rise in her eyes and watched her swallow it down. I was, she said softly. Once. He nodded slowly. You got people there who'll be looking for you? Her gaze darted away. No one who means me well. He didn't press her. Whatever had happened, she wasn't ready to speak of it. Not yet. He knew what it meant to carry pain you couldn't name. So he simply tipped his hat and said, Then you can stay as long as you need. You don't owe me anything. That startled her. You don't want to know my story? He met her eyes. When you're ready to tell it. For a long moment she studied him, as if waiting for the trick, the hidden price every man before him had asked for. But when she found none, her expression softened, almost fragile. Thank you, she whispered. Later that day, she joined Martha in the kitchen, though her movements were stiff and cautious, as if she were afraid of taking up too much space. When Martha handed her a bowl, she flinched, murmured an apology, then began washing dishes without being asked. Martha watched her a long while before saying, You've been hurt, haven't you? The girl froze. Then, in the smallest voice, she said, Everyone gets hurt. Some just don't get to heal. That night, Caleb stayed out by the barn longer than usual, oiling the saddle leather, listening to the wind. He couldn't shake her words, or the look in her eyes, that hollow mix of fear and fire. Whoever she was, she carried the kind of sorrow a person didn't earn easily. When he came inside, the lamps were low. He found her sitting near the fire, her blanket wrapped tight, her gaze fixed on the flames. She didn't see him at first. Her lips moved, whispering something he couldn't quite catch. A prayer, maybe, or a name. Then suddenly she gasped and pressed both hands to her head, trembling. Caleb stepped forward, instinct taking over. Hey! Don't touch me, she cried, shrinking back against the chair. He froze. Her eyes were wide, pupils blown with panic, her whole body shaking. All right, he said quietly, raising both hands. All right, I won't. She turned away, breathing hard, tears glistening in her lashes. After a moment, his voice came again. Low, steady, the way a man talks to a spooked horse. Ain't nobody here gonna hurt you. Not me. Not Martha. Not ever again. For a long time, she didn't move. Then her shoulders eased, just a little. When he turned to go, she whispered so softly he almost missed it. "Why are you being kind to me?" He looked back. The firelight carved shadows across his face, softening the hardness life had given him. "'Cause somebody should have been," he said. And with that, he left her to the warmth of the fire, and the first quiet night she'd known in a long, long time. The following days passed with the quiet rhythm of ranch life, the clink of tools, the creak of the barn door, the low hum of cattle in the distance. Evelyn, she had finally told them her name on the third morning, spoke little, but there was a calmness in her now, a kind of fragile peace that came from being left alone. Caleb noticed it in small ways. She started eating full meals. She helped Martha hang laundry in the sun, humming softly to herself, the tune faint but sweet. Once he caught her smiling, just a flicker, when one of the barn cats climbed into her lap. But there were other moments too, times when she'd hear a noise, the slam of a door, the thud of boots on the porch, and her face would go pale, her body freezing like a hunted deer. Caleb learned not to move too quickly around her, not to touch, not even to stand too close. He didn't mind. Some fences had to be mended slow. That evening the sky bled gold over the hills as the mail wagon rattled up the road. The driver, a talkative old fellow named Timmons, brought supplies, flour, lamp oil, coffee, and a handful of letters. Martha took them at the gate and Caleb joined her, drying his hands on a rag. "Anything for me?" he asked. Timmons grinned. "Only the usual, bills and bad news. Heard some gossip, though, from Clearwater way." He lowered his voice. "That rich man Lyle's been tearing up the countryside looking for a runaway bride. Says the girl's gone mad and needs to be returned for her own good." Caleb frowned. "Lyle? Yep, big fella. Owns half of Clearwater. Reckon he means to own the rest." Martha crossed herself. "Lord have mercy. That poor girl." Timmons tipped his hat and rode off, leaving a trail of dust behind him. Caleb turned toward the porch and then froze. Evelyn was standing in the doorway. Her face was bloodless, her hands gripping the wood so tightly her knuckles were white. The name Lyle had hit her like a bullet. Martha stepped forward. "Sweetheart, you all right?" Evelyn shook her head, stumbling backward. "He's coming," she whispered. "He'll find me." Caleb moved slowly, his voice low. "Evelyn, who's Lyle?" Her eyes filled with tears. "The man I was supposed to marry." The words cracked something open inside her. Years of silence, fear, and shame spilling out all at once. She sank into a chair, clutching her shawl, her voice shaking. "My father owed him money. More than we could ever repay. Lyle offered to forgive the debt. If I became his wife. He said it was mercy. But it wasn't mercy. It was prison." She stared at the fire, her expression far away. "He locked me in his house. Said I'd learn obedience. Said I'd thank him one day. I tried to run once. He found me by the river and told me next time he'd make sure I couldn't run again. So I waited, and when the storm came I took a horse and fled." Her voice broke. "That was 3 nights ago." The room was silent except for the pop of the firewood. Caleb knelt beside her chair. "You're safe here," he said softly. Her eyes lifted, wet with disbelief. "You don't understand. He's powerful. He has men. He'll come for me." He met her gaze, calm, steady, unflinching. "Then he'll have to come through me." Something flickered in her face then, surprise, maybe even hope. Martha cleared her throat. "Well," she said briskly, though her eyes shone, "he'll find no welcome here. We'll say we ain't seen her if anyone asks." Evelyn nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You don't know what you're risking." Caleb rose to his feet, his voice a low rumble. "A man who hurts women stopped being a man long ago. I ain't afraid of him." Later that night, long after Martha had gone to bed, Evelyn sat by the window staring at the moon. The land stretched endless and quiet, silvered by the light. Somewhere out there men might be hunting her. But for the first time she wasn't running. Behind her, Caleb's voice came from the shadows, gentle but firm. "If he comes, he'll find a door that don't open easy." Evelyn turned toward him. The firelight flickered across his face, carving out the lines of strength and calm she'd come to trust. "You don't even know me," she said softly. "I don't need to," he replied. "I can see you've had enough pain to fill a lifetime. That's enough for me to stand by you." Her lips trembled, not with fear this time, but with something she hadn't dared to feel in a long while. "Why?" she whispered. He tipped his hat slightly. Because no one should have to fight alone. And for the first time since she'd fled into the storm, Evelyn felt the faint, fragile stirring of safety, like dawn breaking over a dark horizon. The days that followed were soft, almost tender, as if the land itself knew that the ranch was holding its breath for the wounded girl who'd come in. With the storm, the mornings began with light spilling through thin curtains and the smell of coffee on the stove. Caleb would be up before sunrise tending to the horses, and by the time Evelyn woke, the valley outside her window would already hum with life. The storm that had nearly killed her now felt like a faraway nightmare. Yet sometimes, when the wind rose at night, she would still flinch in her sleep. Caleb noticed these things. He noticed everything. He saw how she kept her distance, how she never took food without murmuring thanks, how her eyes darted toward the door whenever a stranger rode by. He also saw the way her shoulders began to loosen over time, the small signs that she was learning how to breathe again. One afternoon, he found her near the barn, sleeves rolled to her elbows, trying to pour water for the horses. The bucket was too heavy. It tipped, soaking her boots and sending her into a fit of frustrated laughter. Caleb stepped up beside her. "You're supposed to let the horse drink, not drown him." She looked up, startled, then smiled, really smiled, for the first time since she'd arrived. "Then maybe you should stop sneaking up on me," he chuckled. "I wasn't sneaking, just walking quiet." "That's worse," she teased. "You sound like a ghost." "Well," he said, scratching the back of his neck, "you did find me in the middle of a storm. Maybe I am one." Her laugh faded into a softer expression, something like peace. "If you were, you'd be the kind that protects, not haunts." The words landed between them, gentle and unexpected. Caleb didn't reply. He just smiled faintly and picked up the bucket for her. "Let me," he said, but as he reached for it, his fingers brushed hers. A tiny, innocent thing, yet Evelyn froze like she'd been struck. Her breath hitched. Caleb stepped back immediately, his voice low and careful. "Didn't mean nothing by that. I should have asked." She looked at him for a long moment, searching perhaps for the anger or impatience she'd seen in other men. There was none, only calm, only kindness. Finally, she nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's all right, I just forget what it feels like when someone's gentle." He wanted to say something, to tell her that she didn't need to apologize for flinching, that some wounds healed slower than the eye could see. But he held his tongue. Some truths didn't need words. Later that day, Martha caught Evelyn in the kitchen, humming again as she kneaded dough. "That's a lovely sound," the older woman said, smiling. "Been a long time since this house heard a tune." Evelyn blushed. "It's just something my mother used to sing." "Well, keep singing it," Martha said. "Brings life back to the place." That evening, the three of them sat down to supper. Stew, bread, and a silence that was comfortable instead of heavy. Martha told stories about her late husband. Caleb grumbled good-naturedly about a stubborn horse, and Evelyn found herself laughing more than she thought possible. At one point, Martha leaned toward Caleb with a mischievous twinkle. "She's making this place look like a home again, Caleb Dorn. You two could almost pass for a proper couple." The words hit the air like a spark. Evelyn froze, her cheeks blooming red. Caleb cleared his throat, suddenly very interested in his stew. Martha chuckled. "Oh, don't look at me like that. I'm old, not blind." Evelyn stood quickly, gathering the plates to hide her embarrassment. "I'll wash these," she murmured, her voice unsteady. Caleb rose too. "No need," but she was already gone, her footsteps light and quick across the floorboards. Martha shot him a look. "You've gone and flustered her," he sighed. "Wasn't me that said it." "Maybe not," Martha said softly, "but she's starting to care. That's a dangerous thing for a girl who's been hurt." Later, when the lamps burned low, Caleb stepped out to the porch. The moon hung high, spilling silver over the valley. He heard the faint sound of movement and saw Evelyn sitting on the steps, wrapped in a blanket, gazing at the stars. He hesitated, then sat down a few feet away and close enough to speak, far enough to give her space. "I'm sorry for what Martha said," he said quietly. "She means well, just don't know when to hush." Evelyn shook her head. "She didn't upset me." A pause. I don't know how to be seen like that. Like I'm worth something." Caleb turned his head toward her, his eyes soft. "You are." The words lingered between them, carried off by the wind. For a long while, neither spoke. The night was still, the sky endless. Then Evelyn whispered almost to herself, "Maybe I could learn to believe that again." Caleb's reply was barely a breath. "Take all the time you need." And for the first time since the storm, she didn't feel like she was running. From her past, she felt like she might finally be walking toward something new. The sun had barely crested the hills when the peace that Evelyn had begun to build shattered like thin glass. Caleb was fixing the east fence, hammering a new post into the dry ground, when he saw dust on the horizon, a single rider at first, then a second. The glint of polished tack told him these weren't ranch hands. They rode like men used to being obeyed, not asked questions. By the time they reached the gate, Martha was already at the porch, hands on her hips. Evelyn, who'd been hanging laundry behind the house, froze at the sound of hooves. Her heartbeat stuttered, breath catching like a snare. Caleb stepped forward to meet the strangers. The first rider dismounted with practiced ease. His coat was fine, trimmed with gold stitching, boots spotless despite the dust. A man used to money and went to getting his way. "Morning," Caleb said, voice level. The man smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Dorn, is it?" "Lyle Barrow." Caleb's jaw tightened just slightly. "Lyle. What brings you this far out, Mr. Barrow?" "I'm looking for someone," Lyle said, brushing imaginary dust off his gloves. "A woman. Blonde hair, about yay tall, traveling alone. Might have come this way after the storm." His gaze was sharp, searching Caleb's face. "You seen her?" Caleb took his time answering, glancing toward the corral where Evelyn's pale dress had just vanished behind the barn. "Can't say I have," he lied easily. "Storm washed out most of the roads. Could be she went north." Lyle studied him for a long, silent moment, then smiled again, the kind of smile that could cut. "You're sure, rancher?" "Sure as I can be," Caleb replied. Lyle's eyes drifted over the property, pausing on the laundry line, the extra set of boots by the porch, the faint impression of small hands in the wet earth near the well. His gaze flicked back to Caleb's, cold amusement in it. "You run a quiet place, Mr. Dorn. Respectable. Still, I'll be riding through again in a few days. If you happen to see her..." He reached into his coat and pulled out a photograph. A faded tintype of Evelyn, her face soft and unguarded, taken long before fear had carved its lines. "You'll let me know." Caleb didn't reach for the photo. "If she comes through, I'll tell her you're looking," he said evenly. Lyle's smile sharpened. "Oh, she'll know. She always does." He mounted his horse and tipped his hat. "Pleasure, Mr. Dorn." Caleb stood there, jaw clenched, watching until they disappeared into the hills. Only then did he let out the breath he'd been holding. Behind him, Evelyn stepped out from the shadows of the barn, her hands trembling, face pale as linen. "He was here," she whispered. "You spoke to him." "I did," Caleb said quietly. "And I told him nothing." Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't understand, he won't stop. He'll burn this place to the ground if he thinks I'm here." Caleb took a slow step toward her. "Then he'll have to burn through me first." She shook her head violently. "No, I won't let you get hurt for my sake." His voice dropped lower. "Evelyn, you already been hurt enough. That man's got no right to you. No right to come here and scare you again." Her breathing came fast, uneven. "You don't know what he's capable of." Caleb's gaze softened, but his tone stayed firm. "I know what fear looks like. And I know what standing up to it feels like. You ain't alone no more." For a long time, she just stood there staring at him, searching for disbelief, for doubt, for some reason not to trust him. But all she saw was quiet certainty. She stepped closer, her voice breaking. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." He looked down, the brim of his hat shadowing his eyes. "Don't need to. A man don't have to know your past to know what's right." That night, the ranch felt different. Even the air seemed heavier, the crickets quieter. Evelyn couldn't sleep. Every creak of wood, every whisper of wind made her think of Lyle's cold eyes and that false, charming smile. She got up, wrapped herself in a shawl, and went to the porch. Caleb was sitting there, rifle across his knees, staring out into the dark fields. "You should rest," she said softly. He shook his head. "I'll rest when I know he's gone for good." Evelyn hesitated, then sat beside him. The night air was cool, the stars sharp and bright above. After a long silence, she whispered, "No one ever stood up for me before." Caleb's voice was quiet but steady. "Then it's about damn time someone did." She looked at him, this man of few words with hands rough from work and eyes that saw more than they said. Something in her chest loosened. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about running. She was thinking about what it meant to stay. The days after Lyle's visit carried a new kind of tension. Not loud or visible, but living quietly under every breath. Evelyn woke each morning expecting to see riders on the ridge, shadows at the edge of the fields. Yet each sunrise came gentle and gold, the valley calm, the sky clear. Caleb kept his word. He stayed watchful but didn't speak of danger unless it was necessary. His presence alone steadied her. He moved through the ranch like part of the land, quiet, strong, constant. And slowly, Evelyn began to reclaim pieces of herself she'd thought long gone. One morning, Martha sent her to gather eggs from the henhouse. The chore was simple, but to Evelyn it felt like freedom. Barefoot in the soft earth, sunlight warming her shoulders. She hummed under her breath, the same old tune her mother used to sing. When she looked up, she caught sight of Caleb near the corral, repairing a fence rail. He had stripped off his coat, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, and sweat glistened along the line of his forearm. She turned quickly, heart pounding. He looked up just then, catching her gaze. Their eyes met, just for a second. But something in that glance made the air shift. It wasn't fear this time. It was something she didn't have a name for yet. Something that felt alive. That evening, Evelyn insisted on cooking supper as a thank you for everything he'd done. She worked quietly in the kitchen, chopping onions, baking cornbread, stirring the stew with steady hands. Martha smiled knowingly but said nothing. When Caleb came in from the fields, the house smelled like home. Warm bread, roasted herbs, and something sweet she'd made with the last of the sugar. He stopped in the doorway, hat in hand as if afraid to breathe too loud. Didn't expect this. Evelyn turned, her face flushed from the firelight. You've fed me for weeks. It's only fair I return the kindness. Caleb smiled just a little. Can't argue with fair. They ate together, the three of them, and even Martha seemed lighter. The conversation wandered through harmless things. The stubborn horse Caleb called Ghost, the calf that wouldn't stay penned, the storm that had nearly torn the roof off last spring. Evelyn laughed freely, her voice soft and musical. When Martha excused herself early, claiming she had letters to write, Caleb and Evelyn stayed at the table, finishing their coffee in a quiet that wasn't awkward. You've done a fine job, he said finally. Nodding toward the empty plates, she smiled shyly. I almost burned the bread. Martha saved it. Well, tell her I said thank you for not letting me die of hunger. Evelyn laughed, and the sound filled the little house with warmth. The lamplight flickered across her face, softening the lines that fear had left. Caleb found himself staring longer than he meant to. She caught him. Her smile faded into something quieter, uncertain but not afraid. What is it? He shook his head. Nothing, just nice seeing you like this. You look free. Her eyes shimmered in the lamplight. I haven't felt that way in a long time. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged, like the still air before a summer storm. Evelyn looked down at her hands, tracing the rim of her cup. I keep waiting to feel scared again, she said, to wake up and find it all gone. But when I'm here, she lifted her eyes. It's different. I don't feel like I'm surviving. I feel like I'm living. Caleb's throat tightened. He wanted to say something that would hold the weight of what he felt. But all that came out was a whisper. Then stay. The words hung in the air between them, raw and unpolished, carrying more than he meant to reveal. Evelyn's breath caught. Stay? She repeated softly. He nodded once, steady but quiet. As long as you need, or as long as you want. For a heartbeat, she said nothing. The fire cracked in the hearth. The night wind brushed against the windows, and somewhere outside a coyote called into the dark. Then Evelyn smiled. Small, trembling, but real. I think I'd like that. When she rose to clear the table, Caleb caught the faintest scent of lavender from her hair, a trace of something delicate and alive. He watched her move with grace, not as the broken stranger he'd found in the storm, but as a woman beginning to find her own strength again. As the night deepened, he stepped outside, the stars blazing above the ranch. Behind him, laughter drifted through the window, hers bright and soft. And in that moment, Caleb Dorn realized something he hadn't planned for. Somewhere between silence and safety, between fear and peace, he'd lost his heart to the girl he'd sworn only to protect. The peace didn't last. It never did in those parts. A week after that quiet dinner, the horizon began to hum again with tension, the kind that made cattle restless and dogs bark at nothing. Caleb sensed it before he saw it. He'd lived long enough on the edge of bad land to know when trouble was circling back. It started with a trail of hoof prints, 4 riders, cutting through the lower pasture near the creek. They weren't his men. Their tracks were wide and deep, the kind made by heavy horses ridden hard. Caleb crouched down in the dirt, fingertips brushing the damp edge of a print. Someone had passed less than an hour ago. When he looked up, the ridge was empty, but he felt eyes on him, watching, measuring. He straightened slowly, jaw tightening. So Lyle didn't take no for an answer. By the time he rode back to the ranch, Evelyn was on the porch sweeping, her hair pulled back with a ribbon Martha had given her. The wind lifted strands across her face. She smiled when she saw him, but it faltered when she caught the look in his eyes. "What is it?" she asked, setting the broom aside. "Riders, 4 of them, came through the creek bed." "Do you think it's—" He nodded. "Yeah, I think it's Lyle's men." Her face paled. He found us?" Caleb stepped closer, his voice steady. "No one's found us yet, but they're looking. I want you to stay close to the house. Don't wander off the porch unless I say so." She swallowed hard but nodded. "I understand." Martha came out just then, drying her hands on a cloth. "You'll need more than words if they're coming back, Caleb," she said. "This place may be quiet, but it ain't invisible." "I'll handle it," he said. "I always do." But that night, as the 3 of them sat by the fire, the unease in the air grew thick. The windows rattled softly under the wind, and the hounds barked out near the barn until Caleb went to calm them. Evelyn couldn't sleep. Every creak of the old house made her flinch. The memory of Lyle's smirk, his hand on her arm, his voice dripping with false sweetness. It all returned in waves. When she finally got up to check the shutters, she saw him through the window. Caleb, sitting on the porch in the dark, rifle across his knees, eyes fixed on the ridge, watching, guarding. Something in her chest ached at the sight. Gratitude, guilt, fear, maybe all at once. She opened the door quietly and stepped outside. He turned slightly, the glow of his cigarette ember cutting through the dark. "You should be inside," he said. I couldn't sleep. He didn't argue, just motioned to the step beside him. She sat, wrapping her shawl tighter. The night air was sharp, carrying the scent of sage and dust. After a long silence, she whispered, "You shouldn't risk yourself for me." Caleb glanced at her, his face unreadable in the moonlight. "Ain't a risk if it's the right thing to do." She shook her head. "You don't even know who I really am." "I know enough," he said. "You didn't deserve what happened to you, that's all I need to know." Her throat tightened. The words hit deep, too deep. For years, men had looked at her and seen something to use, something fragile or broken. Caleb saw her and didn't ask for anything in return. "Why do you care so much?" she asked quietly. He looked out toward the hills, his voice low. "Because once, someone cared for me, when I didn't think I deserved it either." The wind shifted, carrying the cry of a distant coyote. Evelyn looked at him, and for a moment she saw the weariness in his eyes, the kind that came from carrying too many ghosts. They sat together until dawn began to gray the horizon, and just as the first light broke, a faint sound reached them, the echo of hooves on hard ground. Caleb stood instantly, rifle in hand, his body tense. Evelyn rose too, gripping the porch rail. 4 riders appeared over the ridge, dark against the morning sky. "They've found us," she whispered. Caleb's voice was calm, cold. "Let 'em come." He stepped off the porch, the rising sun catching the steel of his rifle barrel. Evelyn wanted to call out to stop him, but the words stuck in her throat. He moved with the quiet determination of a man who'd made peace with danger long ago. Behind him, the ranch glowed softly in the morning light, his home, her sanctuary, and as the riders drew nearer, Evelyn realized something terrifying. She wasn't afraid for herself anymore. She was afraid for him. The sun had barely climbed above the ridge when the riders reached the fence line. Dust rose around their horses' legs like smoke, curling into the pale morning light. Caleb stood at the edge of the yard, rifle steady in his hands, the brim of his hat shadowing his eyes. 4 men. All strangers, but one. Lyle. He sat tall in the saddle, grinning as though this were some pleasant social call. His coat gleamed black in the sunlight, and the silver buttons on his vest caught the light like small fires. "Well now," Lyle called, his voice smooth and mocking. "You sure picked a fine place to play house, Dorn." Caleb didn't move. "You're trespassing," Lyle laughed. "Oh, don't be like that. I just came to retrieve what's mine." Evelyn stood behind the porch rail, her knuckles white against the wood. Martha was beside her, a shotgun cradled in her arms though her hands trembled. Caleb shifted his rifle slightly. "She ain't yours." "Now that's where you're wrong," Lyle said, swinging a leg over and stepping down from his horse. He walked forward slowly, boots crunching against the dry dirt. "That girl's under contract. Sold fair and legal by her father, may he rest in his whiskey-soaked grave. She ran from me. I'm just here to take her home." "Home?" Caleb's voice was low, dangerous. "You mean the place where you broke her jaw for not talking fast enough? Or the one where she slept in the barn 'cause you liked her scared?" Lyle's grin faltered. His men shifted uneasily in their saddles. "You don't know a damn thing, Dorn," Lyle snapped. "You think because you got a ranch and a few good horses you can play the hero?" Caleb cocked the rifle. The sound cracked the air like a warning shot. "I don't play at anything." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Lyle smirked again, though the edge of fear showed in his eyes. "You won't shoot me. The law's on my side." "The law don't reach this far," Caleb said. Silence stretched, tight, trembling. A crow cawed somewhere in the distance. Then Evelyn stepped forward. Her feet moved before she realized it. Her voice was clear, steady, the strongest it had sounded since the day he found her. "Lyle," she said. He turned toward her, his smile twisting cruelly. "There you are, darling. Thought maybe Dorn had you under lock and key." "You don't own me," she said. He took a step closer, spreading his hands. "You think this man's any better? He'll get tired of playing savior soon enough." "Men always do." Evelyn shook her head. "He doesn't want anything from me." "Then he's a fool," Lyle hissed. "You think the world will just forget who you are? What you are? He never finished. Caleb's rifle went off. One shot, clean and deliberate, kicking dust inches from Lyle's boots. The echo rolled across the valley like thunder. "Next one won't miss," Caleb said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were steel. "Now get off my land." Lyle's men looked to him, uneasy. One muttered, "He ain't bluffing, boss." Lyle hesitated, jaw tightening. He wanted to spit, to curse, but he saw the look in Caleb's eyes, the kind that belonged to men who'd fought and bled before. Slowly, he stepped back. "This ain't over," he snarled, climbing into his saddle. "You just made yourself an enemy." Caleb lowered the rifle but didn't answer. The riders turned and rode off, their silhouettes shrinking against the brightening horizon. Only when the sound of their hooves had vanished did Evelyn exhale the breath she'd been holding. Caleb turned to her. "You all right?" She nodded shakily. "He'll come back." "Maybe," Caleb said. "But next time he won't find you here alone." Martha stepped forward, lowering the shotgun. "What are you meaning to do, Caleb?" He looked out over the fence line, jaw set. "I'm meaning to finish this. If Lyle thinks he can claim her, he's going to find out just how wrong he is." Evelyn caught his arm. "No, don't go after him. You'll get yourself killed." He looked at her hand, small, trembling, gripping his sleeve, and something softened in his eyes. "You said once you felt alive here," he murmured. "That don't mean much if I let him take that from you." Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "I don't want you hurt because of me." Caleb smiled faintly, that same quiet confidence she'd come to know. "I've been hurt worse for a lot less reason." And with that, He walked toward the barn to saddle his horse, the morning light glinting off the rifle slung across his back. Evelyn watched him go, heart caught between fear and something deeper, something she couldn't name yet but felt all the way to her bones. Martha laid a hand on her shoulder. "That man's fighting for more than just you, child. He's fighting for what's right." As the sound of hooves faded down the trail, Evelyn whispered to the wind, "Then come back to me, Caleb. Please, come back." The trail was quiet that morning, too quiet. Caleb rode with his rifle strapped to his saddle and his hat pulled low, the early sun slanting gold through the canyons. The land out there was rough. No law, no fences, just open dust and silence. He'd tracked men before, and Lyle was easy to follow. A man like that left marks wherever he went. Broken brush, trampled grass, empty whiskey bottles near cold fires. By noon, Caleb found them camped by the river, 4 horses tied to a dead tree, smoke rising from a dying fire. Lyle was there, sitting on a rock, his back to the sun, talking low to one of his men. Caleb dismounted and walked forward slowly, his boots whispering against the dry earth. The first man saw him and went for his gun, but Caleb's rifle barked first. One shot clean through the dirt beside the man's boot. "Don't," Caleb said calmly, "unless you're ready to lose more than your pride." The camp froze. Lyle turned, and when he saw Caleb standing there, tall, steady, eyes cold as stone, his smirk faltered. "You got guts, Dorn," he said, rising to his feet. "But you're a fool to come alone." "I ain't here to talk about me," Caleb said. "I'm here to finish what you started." Lyle chuckled, though his voice wavered. "You think she's yours now? That's rich. You don't even know what she is." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I know enough to put a bullet through any man who lays a hand on her." "Big words for a ranch hand playing hero," Lyle sneered. "You think the world's gonna change for her? For the likes of you?" Caleb stepped closer, his voice steady as the river beside them. "Maybe not. But I don't need the world. Just this land, my land. And on my land, no woman gets dragged back to hell because some drunk thinks she's property." Lyle's grin twisted into something darker. "Then I guess we settle it here." He reached for his revolver, too slow. Caleb's rifle cracked once, and Lyle's hat flew from his head, a hole torn clean through the brim. The echo thundered through the canyon. Lyle froze, hand trembling on the gun. "I told you before," Caleb said quietly, reloading without looking away. "Next one won't miss." One of Lyle's men bolted, spurring his horse and vanishing into the dust. Another followed. The last one stood still a moment longer, then dropped his weapon and backed away, muttering a curse. Now only Lyle remained. Caleb leveled the rifle, eyes locked on him. "Walk away, Lyle. Go east, go north, I don't care. But you ride back toward my ranch again, I'll put you in the ground." Lyle stared at him, chest heaving. Then slowly he lowered his gun. "You think you've won, Dorn? You think she'll stay after this? You'll wake up one day and she'll be gone, just like before. That's what girls like her do, they run." Caleb's expression didn't change. "Then I'll just have to give her a reason not to." Lyle spat into the dust. "You're a damn fool." "Maybe," Caleb said, "but I sleep better that way." He turned, mounted his horse, and rode off, leaving Lyle standing by the river, beaten, small, his words swallowed by the wind. The ride back was long. By the time the ranch came into view, dusk had painted the sky red. Evelyn stood on the porch waiting, her hands twisting the edge of her shawl. When she saw him, her breath hitched. He dismounted slowly, every muscle aching, but when she ran to him, he managed a tired smile. "Told you I'd come back." Tears filled her eyes as she touched his sleeve, then froze when she saw the small cut on his temple. "You're hurt. It's nothing," he said. "Lyle's gone. He won't bother you again." She stared up at him, disbelief and relief colliding inside her. "You didn't?" He shook his head. "Didn't have to. He's too much a coward to die like a man." Martha appeared in the doorway, a hand pressed to her chest. "Lord have mercy, Caleb Dorn. You look like you've been through the war." "Feels about the same," he said with a faint smile. Evelyn stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Why did you do it? You could have been killed." He looked at her then, really looked. The last light of sunset caught her face, soft and gold, and for a long moment neither spoke. "Because you deserve someone to stand up for you," he said simply. "No one ever did before." Her lips parted, but no sound came. The tears finally fell. silent, glimmering trails down her cheeks. She reached up, touching his face gently. "No one's ever said that to me," she whispered. "Then it's about time someone did." The air between them grew still. He started to turn away, but she caught his arm, holding him there. "Caleb," she said softly, "I'm not running anymore." He met her gaze, and something deep inside him eased, the kind of peace he hadn't known in years. "Good," he murmured, "because I wasn't planning on letting you." The last light of day sank behind the hills, and the world fell quiet around them. Two souls, scarred but unbroken, standing together in the glow of a promise neither dared to name. The days that followed were softer, like the world itself had exhaled. The land lay quiet under wide blue skies, the grass golden alive again. The danger that had haunted the ranch seemed to have blown away with Lyle and his men, leaving behind something fragile but whole. Evelyn found herself waking before sunrise, standing at the window just to watch the light crawl over the hills. Every morning she half expected the fear to return, the trembling in her chest, the old voice that whispered, "Run." But it didn't. Instead, she felt stillness. Peace. Caleb kept working as always, fixing fences, tending the horses, silent and steady. But something between them had changed. He didn't have to speak it, and neither did she. The air itself seemed to carry the truth. That evening, when the heat faded and the crickets began their song, Evelyn went out to the porch. Caleb was sitting there, sharpening a knife under the glow of a lantern. The faint sound of metal against stone was rhythmic, calming. She leaned against the post. "You always work this late?" He smiled faintly. "Old habits. Storms, thieves, long nights. A man learns not to waste daylight." She stepped closer, her shawl slipping off one shoulder. "And what about now? You still think there's a storm coming?" He looked up at her, slow, deliberate. "Maybe not outside." For a long moment they just watched each other. The lantern light flickered across his face, tracing the lines of weariness, the strength in the silence. Evelyn felt her heart twist with something warm and fierce. "I used to think peace was something you found by running," she said softly. "But it's not. It's something you build." Caleb set the knife down, his voice quiet. "You built plenty of it here." She smiled a little. "No, you did. You gave me a place to breathe again." He shook his head. "I just gave you shelter. You're the one who decided to live." The words lingered like smoke. She took a step forward, close enough to see the faint scar along his jaw, the hint of dust on his shirt collar. "You could have turned me away that night," she said. "You didn't even know me." "Didn't have to," he said. "You looked like someone worth saving." Her throat tightened. "No one's ever said that to me." Caleb's eyes softened. Then maybe no one was looking close enough. The wind rose then, gentle, carrying the scent of rain and wild sage. Somewhere beyond the barn, thunder murmured over the distant hills. The first stars flickered out across the sky. Evelyn turned her face toward them, her voice almost a whisper. "When I was a girl, my mother used to tell me the stars were promises, that if one stayed bright long enough, it meant someone kept theirs." He looked up too. "And which one's yours?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe that one." She pointed toward a small, steady light above the ridge. He followed her gaze, then said quietly, "Then I'll make sure it never fades." Evelyn turned to him, eyes shining with something deeper than tears. The space between them seemed to hum, not with fear but with belonging. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His hand brushed her cheek. Rough, warm, real. "No one had ever touched me before," she whispered, voice trembling. "Not like this." Caleb's thumb traced the corner of her jaw, gentle as the wind. "Then stay," he murmured. The same words he'd spoken that first night. "Stay as long as you want. I ain't asking for anything but that." Her breath hitched, a soft sound that was half laughter, half relief. "Then I guess I'll be here a while." He smiled, small but sure. "Good, I'll hold you to it." The thunder rumbled again, distant and slow, rolling like a heartbeat across the plains. The first drops of rain began to fall, tapping softly on the porch roof. Evelyn leaned against him, his arm slipping easily around her shoulders. They stayed like that, no promises, no grand words, just two souls who had finally found the quiet they'd both been searching for. When the rain came harder, they didn't move. The world could change again tomorrow, but tonight belonged to them. to the whisper beneath the stars, to the calm after the storm, to the simple truth that sometimes love doesn't arrive with fire or thunder. Sometimes it begins with one word, then stay.